Woohoo! Yo! What's up, everyone? It is the big J-Dog here. It's Jakey Boy. Hey, guys. Thanks for tuning in for yet another podcast. I got some really great comments based on my last episode with Raj. We had a great chat. He was a great guy, and I'm glad that you guys really enjoyed it and got a real feel for his incredibly adventurous life. I'm loving that you guys are listening to this podcast, and even just hearing that you're just doing your food shop in Tesco and you're thinking, do I want quinoa or should I just get some beans? And then it's me, just my voice playing in your ears. And that's kind of crazy for me to think that people are actually listening to my voice. They're enjoying this podcast. It's like I'm on the radio. Well, I guess I sort of am. And it's going really well so far. It's pretty good fun, all of this. So yeah, thanks for having me in your earlobe today. It's quite a tight space to be in, but looking generally quite clean, so nice going. This week's episode, I am speaking with yet another adventurer, a really great guy of the name of Hector Alexander. Hector Alexander is, as a name, that's pretty cool, hey? Like, I love the name Hector. And then to say the name Hector Alexander sounds like a stoic from like 200 AD. If he hadn't, he's done some cool stuff, but if he hadn't done anything and he really was just the name, Hector Alexander's still pretty cool. But yeah, he's done some really great stuff. So he is the founder of an adventure retreat business called Loaf. And that's loaf like a fully seeded bread loaf. No emulsifiers, ladies and gentlemen. We don't want a slice. We don't want it white. We want it nice and healthy to fill us up with the whole loaf. Now, Hector, he cycled solo from London to Bangkok, crossing 17 countries in nearly 18 months. And he came back wanting to share the same experience for adventure and travel with the world. And that's why he set up his new company, Loaf. In this conversation, we talk about the misconceptions of traveling on social media, loneliness on the road, and the realities of a solo adventure around the world, how boarding school can surprisingly prepare you to be self-sufficient, and his deeply spiritual experience in an ashram where he was just cycling along and decided, you know what, I'm going to turn a left, and met a spiritual leader where he had a very deep spiritual experience there. And lastly, we talk about the differences in culture between the West and the East. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's nice to talk to someone who has a fresh perspective. He had only arrived in the UK 3 weeks from our trip. So only 3 weeks he had been back in the UK and was having this podcast, which resulted in a great guy who talks about the world as a real global entity and not kind of stuck in cultural norms and the way that the culture tells us to think. I hope that you guys really enjoy this episode. I am getting bloody hot under these duvet sheets because I'm still using this as my sound studio for these introductions. But I hope you appreciate the audio efforts. I'm absolutely sweating bullets, so I hope that you crack on with the podcast. The Off Grid Podcast. You've cycled, 17 countries. You've gone London to Bangkok. So by the time, now you're back, do you find that there's a acclimatization phase?
Yeah, so actually, I felt quite low after finishing traveling. And I think in part that was because when I was traveling, I felt so high and I almost felt like I'd solved all of my problems by just seeing lots of the world. And I can tell you, a sabbatical doesn't solve all of your problems. They just wait for you in London, in Shepherd's Bush. Actually, my problems were waiting for me, and they were kind of, waiting for my return. So I got back and I started to unpack my bags, and suddenly there was this realization: oh shit, I need to. I'm not this kind of enlightened being, although I thought I was for a little bit, and then I started reading more about the experiences of people who do take sabbaticals, and it's actually super common for people to come back to their old lives, kind of, and go through a bit of a blues, not least because we think that when we're just traveling, I was traveling for nearly 18 months, and that's a lot of time to ruminate on one's potential direction in life. So people often will be like, well, clearly you've thought about all of your future direction. You know exactly what you want to do.
You've got the answers, right?
The answers, and then I didn't. Or, I mean, obviously I didn't. So and then you think, shit, should I have been thinking about this a little bit more while I was traveling? so yeah, I mean, just to anyone who does do a sabbatical, I recommend talking to other people who've done one, and just be kind to yourself in those first few months, because it does take a little bit of time to get your mojo back, get your deal mojo back.
Mate, absolutely. I had the same thing. I've been back 9 months now and still feel like I'm coming back in other ways. It's like a massive adjustment when you've been out of your culture and people that have this impression of who you are, and they ask you questions about what you're doing with your life, and you've just spent, a year or more just actually having none of that. And then the questions start plowing in, and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Yeah, and then one starts to question. Well, there's so much growth that does happen when traveling. That can't be denied. However, just takes a little bit of time for the lessons of that growth to land. So, for example, I think it took me 6 months to really start for some of the lessons that I'd learned, when like sitting by myself on the side of the road in Saudi Arabia, putting up my tent, being very independent and just very content. I think only 6 months after I finished traveling do some of those lessons start to emerge. And I've noticed it in particular about how I deal with difficult situations that arise, whether it's with work or with personal life. I think before traveling, I was much more reactive. And now I can sense that there's just a bit more of a delay between something happening and me biting that person's head off. There's just a few more seconds before I react. Well, like when I go home for 15 minutes, I'm not furious. But this, previously it was like 10, right? So the progress
That's progress. Yeah.
yeah, it's progress. You can't deny it.
Mate, I want to go all the way back to the start as well. We've spoken about this adapting after traveling, but there's always a reason you want to leave as much as there is a reason you want to go somewhere. So I'm interested in when you first set about thinking of going on this trip, what were the main drivers at that time that made you want to leave your life and the UK to set off on a bike towards Bangkok?
Yeah, so I actually couldn't I didn't have an idea of my destination at the beginning. I just said I was going to head east, and I didn't know how long for, and I didn't know where east I was going. So there wasn't it was not like that I had a reason because I wanted to get to a certain destination. I didn't have a just destination. Destination started to form when I got, halfway through the trip, but I left with kind of an open book about where I would go. And I left because I was given a book by a friend of mine. And the book is called 1 Year on a Bike by Martin Doulard. And this guy's a videographer, photographer, and he cycled from Amsterdam to Singapore. And then he cycled from the north of North America to the south of South America. And then he returned to Amsterdam for a little bit, and he bought a little dilapidated house in the Italian Alps, and he started doing it up and refurbishing it. And his His videos on YouTube are beautiful. He produces like an hour of footage every week, and so you can watch him on YouTube building by hand his little house, his little cabin, he calls it. Anyway, I was given this book by my good friend Charlie, and I read the book, and it reminded me of another journey that I'd read by Patrick Leigh Fermor, and I was given another book when I was 18 by my grandmother. And this book by Patrick Leigh Fermor followed his journey by foot from the Hook of Holland all the way to Constantinople at the time, which is Istanbul. And I guess in the back of my mind, that had planted a seed where I wanted to go and do one of these big trips, but I didn't know how and when. 10 years later, I was given this book by Martin Dulard. I read the book and I was like, well, shit, I've just got to go and do something like this. This is my calling. I think I'd be so at home doing it. So I was very lucky. I'd co-founded my previous business with my brother, and he was very happy to take on the reins as CEO. And I then had the opportunity to take a sabbatical. And so I had that career break that I'd been waiting for. And in my mind, there was nothing else I could do with that career break. Nothing else crossed my mind, in fact, which is weird to think about it. So I packed up my room. I gave lots of my stuff to charity. I packed up all my books, and I left my job and my life behind. And I remember so vividly getting on my bicycle, and I'd set a date. The reason why I actually started was because I'd set the date of 21st of August 2023. And that's so easy to have plans and dreams of things to do, but it wouldn't have manifested if I hadn't just set the date on that date, which was actually the day after my grandmother's 90th birthday. And I'd set that date like 9 months beforehand. So I was kind of working up to this the whole time, buying the bicycle, getting the panniers, getting the tent. And it was the first time I'd ever ridden my bicycle as I rode out of my grandmother's house. And I headed towards the south coast before getting a ferry to France. And in that first 10 minutes, I was like, holy shit, I'm actually doing this. I don't know when I'm going to next see my family. It's kind of crazy. And I recorded some videos of those first few days, and then I stopped posting on Instagram. But I looked back at those videos quite recently, and I was like, that's, I'm now 31. I look back and I'm like, wow, that guy, whoever that guy was, that's so awesome that he did that. And I'm so proud of that guy. It doesn't feel like me at all. It feels like just this kid who looks so young and so inexperienced, wobbling around on his bicycle. So that's the starting story, basically.
Why doesn't it feel like you?
Because it feels so distant. I think that's what it is. It feels like a long time ago. I've seen a lot since I left, and maybe it's a bit cheesy to say, but there's that whole phrase about no man steps in the same river twice. And I think there's something about, I look back at that guy and I see that there's so much water under the bridge between where I am now and where that guy is. And I maybe it's almost, I'm kind of excited for that guy when I see pictures of him, because I'm like, shit, there's so much that this person is going to see. He's going to see so much life in the next 18, 16 months or whatever. So cool. So
Yeah, sometimes I feel now how internet and social media has influenced traveling in really good ways, but also I think bad ways, in that you can find like the best restaurant in whatever town you're in. You can use like maps.me or whatever it is to go to wherever it is you want to go and hike a trail. But also I feel like people look at what's on Instagram and they think traveling is about the place that they're going to and the destination and the things that they are seeing. But it sounds like your experience was actually what you're calling life, like what you experienced along the way. It wasn't actually about the destination. How would you describe like that bit that isn't the Instagram picture of, hey, look at me on a beach?
yeah, you said, you earlier asked, why did I leave? And I think I left in large part because I was so sick of living in a world where everything I did was about the destination. I was running a startup. The startup is not about the journey. People don't, for some reason, obviously, when we're being very holy, we say, well, I'm doing my startup because of the journey. But very often, a lot of people with their jobs, they work all day, every day because the destination they're trying to get to. And I felt like I was getting on this, there was just this conveyor belt of destinations. And I was actually sick of it. And I just wanted I wanted to appreciate the journey for the journey. And there's no better way of experiencing it. Like, we can now travel anywhere in the world. It takes me eight hours to get to Kenya. You know? And think of how much amazing culture and life and how many beautiful people you miss if you were walking to Kenya, right? And I think so much of life it gives you the destination, as you kind of pointed out. We can look on Instagram and we can see where we're going to end up. We don't see on Instagram how we're going to get there. And that is the best part of travel, in my opinion. So, I had a real moment like that last night. I was sitting with a friend in Shepherd's Bush, and we just had some dinner, and we were just looking at people walking by. And in that moment, we were nowhere near our destinations of where we both want to be from a business perspective. But for a moment, we just appreciated the journey that we were both on. And I think that there's something magical about that. So the best place, I think, to appreciate the journey was in India, because in India, especially where I started in Tamil Nadu, which is like the southeastern state. And that's really not a tourist destination place at all. And so you're not going from destination to destination, not like going up Kerala where you're going through all these beautiful beachside towns. You're going through really places where just normal Tamils live, like people who, where they're very surprised to see a tourist, let alone a tourist on a bicycle. I can't believe it. I mean, I was on the local news because of this, and a bit embarrassingly, I got involved in one of there was a recent election last year, where Modi got re-elected, and I was just in the town walking around, and suddenly I heard all these firecrackers going off, and I walk out, and so I was like, there was a whole crowd of people who gathered around me, and they started cheering me on, and there's a guy with a camera and whatever, and I didn't really know what was going on. I definitely didn't want to get involved in the election stuff, but no one was really telling me why they were firing off these firecrackers. And then later that day, someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, I think I recognize you." And the following day, someone else, "Hey, I think I recognize you." And slowly it turns out that I'd been on the local news as this guy who was apparently endorsing Modi for being part of his political campaign. So, and that kind of thing doesn't happen if you're looking at the destinations, right? It only happens if you're looking for the journey.
And you didn't ask for it either.
No, right. You have to be very much in receive mode, for sure.
How do you think the world? How do you think the world perceives you differently when you're this foreigner on a bike compared to when you're in the UK and you look like everyone else?
Hmm. Anyone who's traveling by bicycle is not threatening in any way. And I remember seeing in Oman, there was a big difference between me. I was the only cycle tourist I met in Oman, aside from one beautiful family where they had 3 kids, like a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and 10-year-old, and each one had their own bicycles. And they cycled to Oman from Switzerland, where they were living in Bern, and they'd taken a year to do it with their 3 adorable children. And but aside from them, the only other tourists I saw in Oman were in these great big motorhomes, and they'd be driving from beautiful motorhome parking spot to motorhome parking spot. And my interactions with the locals was completely different to the interactions of the guys in the cars, because in the cars, people would be just winding down the window, they'd be getting some water, they'd be doing stuff, their fuel, whatever. And I would roll up and I would kind of just lie sprawled on the floor in the service station, absolutely wrecked, and desperate for some kind of electrolytes. And having gone through, sometimes there's 100 kilometers between each service station, and literally nothing else in Oman. It's really very empty in parts. And so my interactions with people were very different. It was almost like instantly people, because probably there was no prospect of them stealing anything from me of value, and so I never had any issues with anyone like trying to rob me, even though people say that, you know, parts of India are unsafe. Or no, it was always fine. And obviously, being a man helps with that. You know, I'm quite tall, so I didn't feel physically threatened anyway. But no one felt threatened by me. And so I would be welcome to go and sleep in the back of mosques in Saudi Arabia. I'd be sitting with the Pakistani and Bangladeshis at dinner, and they would cook for me and host me and things. All the Saudi families would rush out and welcome me in. Because someone on a bike is totally accessible, you know. And I'd never be wearing earphones. So I'd always be willing to listen and to stop and to, again, it's welcoming things as they happen.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
rushed, sorry, go.
Yeah, no, go mate. You're on it.
I I rushed through Europe for sure. And when I got to Egypt, I realized, hey, there's no hurry. And actually, I met a Dutch couple of cyclists when I was in Egypt, and they taught me the beauty of slow travel and just taking our time. And if we get held up in a little town, we get held up. It's fine. And so when I got to South India, you know, I ended up going to there was a Zen Buddhist monastery that I ended up cycling past, and I popped in for 16 days. Then I went to another ashram with the hugging saint Amma, who's magnetic, and I stayed there for a few days, and then ended up spending, you know, almost like 2 months or more in Ladakh in the north of India. Things slowly slowed down because there's so much to see, there's so much to welcome, you know.
Was there an experience as you're going through all these countries that really touched your heart? Was there a particular culture or even a specific experience that happened to you where you thought that had changed who you are that I'm talking to today?
Hmm. So I just mentioned that woman Amma, the hugging saint. And so she's got a ashram in the southwest of India in Kerala. And I had heard about her through the spiritual grapevine, but I didn't know much about her. And it turns out I was cycling past her ashram. So I popped in, and there's 3,000 people, devotees, that live there with her in these big tower blocks that were built in the 1970s or 80s. So they're quite kind of old school. Or maybe they were built a bit later, but it's quite kind of a grungy old school vibe. And everyone's wearing white. And you arrive and you think, well, this is clearly a cult. For sure, it's a cult. Like, there's little pictures of her everywhere, and every day people come out, and from midday until 4 a.m., so that's a long time, people are with her in celebration of her teachings. And she hardly sleeps. She's now in her mid-70s, and she teaches Advaita Vedanta, which is a kind of Hinduism. She doesn't speak any English, and she teaches in her local Kerala dialect. So it's a relatively inaccessible for someone who's not really au fait with her teachings. But there's lots of books of her with her face on lying around. But you walk into the elevator and there's a picture of her in the elevator. And so originally I was a bit kind of taken aback by this. But I got to learn about her, and when as soon as she was able to communicate with anyone when she was very young, she saw no intrinsic difference with anyone that she met. So whether it's the poorest guy in the village to the wealthiest man in the state, she would have no understanding with why someone wealthy and why someone poor. Like these people are all exactly the same. They're all made out of the same Brahman, the same kind of universe, right? So I started learning about through her. I started learning about Advaita Vedanta, and then it transpires that her way in which she does her service, her sangha, I think it's called, is through hugging people. So thousands of people every day will come and they'll queue up and they'll hug her. And in those hugs, people will be able to ask her questions. So people will ask her, you know, whether what they should do about her, whether they should get married or divorced, or whether they should take a job or study in university. And because she can't speak English, it's translated for her off a paper note. And I met a guy there who was wearing a neck brace, and he had a degenerative condition, but he went to the doctors in Singapore, which is where he's from, and the doctors had no idea what was wrong, but he was having these headaches and he couldn't sleep. So they scanned him and he went to all the best doctors, no idea. But then he heard about Amma, And so Amma was visiting Singapore. He went and got a hug from her, and he said, "I've been to all the on the note." He said, "I've been to all the doctors. No one knows why I can't sleep and I've got headaches, but I think there's something really wrong with me. Can you help?" And Amma looks at him after hugging him, and says, "There's something wrong with your neck. You need to go and get your neck scanned. It's something in the bone." And he goes away, and God, she probably spends 10 seconds with him. It's so quick. He goes away, he gets his neck scanned, and they find out that he's got this degenerative condition. And from then, he's a devotee. And she has this ability to see the energies in people. I mean, I don't want to pitch her because it's really not my business, but like, it's kind of weird, right?
Did you
Anyway,
meet her?
so I met her. I hugged her actually a number of times, and the power I felt when I hugged her, I had to sit down. It was something just overwhelming. Anyway, so she looks at the crowd of thousands of people, and she says, every night, she says, "I can't see the difference between me and you. When I look at you as a crowd, I see 1,000 of my faces looking right back at me." And that's a very powerful message. And so I left Amma's ashram and I started cycling up the coast for a few more days. And because of the spread of Christianity, there's quite a lot of Christian churches, Catholic churches along the coast. And I never, I went to a Protestant school. I would never go into a church normally. I was basically kind of agnostic. And aside from only being able to, I was only allowed to open my Christmas presents after going to church. So it's basically the only reason why I would go to church every year. I was that kind of religious. But I saw this church as I was cycling after Amma's place, and something pulled me inside, and I went inside and I sat down, and there's Jesus, there's Christ in crucifixion, hanging on the cross, kind of this life-size figure. And the church is empty, and I'm on the stone floor, and there's no pews, so it's just me and Christ up there. And I sit down, and I start crying. And I'm like, wow, this is powerful. And it suddenly occurs to me that all of those teachings that I had over the course of my school career, like literally hundreds, if not thousands of church services, driving into me the lessons of Christianity that I completely got over my head. Those lessons were the same lessons that Amma was teaching. Jesus was being crucified, and as he was being crucified, he did not blame the people who crucified him, because he said, "Hey, these people don't know what they're doing." And he felt complete compassion for those people. And that's what Amma felt when she looked out at the crowd, complete compassion for those people, because she sees just herself looking back at her. And that was probably the most emotional and powerful experiences of my trip. Like, really, it astonished me how I was drawn into that church to have that moment with, and connect with the religion of my country, even though I never think about it, or did never think about it before.
Wow, what a story. And I bet you're glad that you popped in.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
That
it's
sounds
actually
pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it's that sense of being, over the course of the whole trip, so many things like that happened where I would just end up in some random place for no reason, and something astonishing would happen.
Yeah.
And it almost made me think that that there's something determinate about our existence. Like, I don't think it's any accident that things happen when they happen and how they happen. And that's very obvious when traveling by bicycle.
And a lot of people who see these people that go, solo bikepacking or even just backpacking around the world, they can't comprehend what that actually involves. And equally, when you experience those things, sometimes it's actually not maybe what you thought it would be. What do you think are some of like the main misconceptions people have about traveling the world?
That it's lonely. People always say, God, you must have been lonely when you were by yourself in Oman camping or wherever. And I wasn't once lonely. I was just at peace. I was with the world all the time. And I mean, yeah, sure, sometimes I was by myself. In fact, for huge stretches, I was by myself. But I was never once like, I would, I wish someone else was with me right now. Maybe it's because it's so different to how I lived beforehand and how I live now, where I'm surrounded by everyone. I'm surrounded by people all the time, which is wonderful. I love people, don't get me wrong. But it's almost like a psychedelic trip. It's so outside of our normal conception of life. to spend so much time by oneself. It's very precious. So it was never lonely.
How many days at a time was like the maximum that you would spend just on your own?
I mean, that's also the case. It's like I will not very long, maybe 1 or 2 nights,
Okay.
because I would always be with, they may not have been my university friends, but
Right.
they were like I mean, probably only hours. Come to think of it, there are people everywhere, literally everywhere. Yeah, okay, there were some stretches, maybe in Oman, some stretches where there was fewer people, but in India is packed with people. Like, and like you get a puncture or something, and just you think you're in the middle of nowhere, and within 30 seconds you're surrounded by 20 guys from like Ladakh or whatever, and they're all desperate to help you with a bicycle. So yeah.
It's interesting because I've found that even when I've been solo backpacking around the world, I've had people around me, um, Westerners like me, who are traveling, and I've still felt periods of loneliness. So, what do you think it is about you that didn't like feel lonely? Of course, you're alone, but to not feel lonely, that feels quite unique.
Boarding school. No, I joke, but I think there probably is something.
Wait, you know
There
what? I
is
thought that makes sense.
kind of, yeah, there's something in that, because it's very dog eat dog, and therefore I think you've, like, not for everyone, but for some people, they end up becoming quite self-sufficient and independent, because they're like, shit, if I open myself up too much to the world, then I'm going to get chewed up and spat out by my peers. So there's something in that, but I'm not sure if that's entirely the case. I actually think, I mean, I remember getting to Sri Lanka, and I definitely felt more need to be with people in Sri Lanka than I did beforehand, because of we're beings of comparison. And in Sri Lanka, I would see like these, hot young couples hanging out on the beach, and I'd be like solo, sweating so much on my bicycle, quite disgusting, if I'm being totally honest. And I'd look at that hot young couple, and I'd be like, damn, if only, So I think it's mainly because there were lots of. Sounds like you were traveling with. There were lots of Westerners around. Sometimes, like with you when you
Yeah,
were
on
traveling.
and off. I mean, I had like periods of time where I was just in the mountains, but other times I was around Westerners, and I felt the same thing. It's kind of when you're around other people that look like you, then you compare yourself to them.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, yeah, right.
otherwise, you're just a foreigner, so you can kind of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a
exactly.
sense of freedom in a way.
It's total freedom. That's it. The freedom is not just being able to travel from one place to the next. The freedom is in being totally incognito and being nobody. And that's another thing. We were talking about being very destination focused. We're so destination focused. We love, people get a new job and they're immediately thinking about the next job. And similarly, in the West, nothing is incognito. I mean, hell, I write a newsletter, right? I want to put everything out there. I want to share everything. I want to be me. I want to be Hector. I need a personal brand. Are you stupid for not having a personal brand? Like, otherwise, if you don't have a personal brand, you're going to be replaced by AI agents. It's inevitable. And but in if you're in South India, no one gives a fuck about who you are. You are nobody. It's not like I can go and pitch my startup to someone. They don't care. Like it suddenly occurred to me at some point that I don't know how many billion people are in the world? 8 billion people. There's probably not even a billion people on LinkedIn. And so we think that everything that's important is because you have a massive LinkedIn following. And this podcast is going to be on LinkedIn. So I don't want to do it down. Obviously, it's great.
Yeah, it's going global to all the world on LinkedIn.
Right, exactly. And yeah, so we're so focused on building this personal brand, probably because we want to endure after our deaths. We know life is it's the same reason why people build. Like I'm in on St James's Street now in Mayfair, and there is so many beautiful buildings here because people obviously have such egos back in the day that they want to build something that endures, and it has endured them. But whoever they are, forgotten completely. And I guess we hope that our LinkedIn profiles and our Instagrams are going to be enduring after, or something's going to endure. And the fact is, nothing is. And we basically are as incognito as I would be if I was sitting eating street food on the street in South India. And like, the world doesn't, I'm sorry to say this, dear listeners, all four of you who are still left, we like, no one cares about us. Fundamentally, we care about us and we care about our families, but we're going to be forgotten, and that gives us immense. We can just do whatever we want for good reason, right? But like, so long as it's good and wholesome and things, but like, we really can go and live our lives, because no matter what we do, no one's gonna care in like one generation, let alone in a million years when it's all dust.
Hector, thanks for speaking with me today. You're a top guy. You're a real adventurer and philosophical thinker. And I've enjoyed watching this rugged adventurer in his Mayfair office talk about his experiences around the world. So, cheers for coming on.
It's a contradiction, really, isn't it?
It
A
it
paradox.
feels it, but it kind of summarizes the trip in a way. You're like
Yeah.
you're back now. You're back. So it's good to see you, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Jake. It's been a joy.